I think one thing that gives me hope is that there are so many good people out there in the working world that I come upon every day who, in whatever job they might have, really show love and caring for their colleagues, whether they know them well or not, whether they have a HR in their title or not. And 9 times out of 10 or more, I am consistently surprised by people wanting to do the right thing and help others. And I really believe that's inherent in how most people approach their day.
Hey friends, welcome to the Changing Work podcast. We are so glad you're here.
My name is Nick.
And I'm Scott.
And this is the podcast where we talk about changing work from the inside out.
So if you're into making the workplace and the world a better experience via conscious business practices, stick around. This is for you. So Christina is a practicing attorney, and she's also the Chief Human Resources Officer at Instacart for the last 4 years-ish. And she's focused on building a holistic people and talent strategy designed to attract, retain, and develop employees at Instacart. She was most recently was the Chief People Officer at LinkedIn. That's how I know Christina, and previously held HR roles at Facebook and Intuit. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you. So great to be here.
Yeah. So today we're talking about finding personal and professional harmony. Before we get into that, what is one thing that makes your heart light up?
Every single day, I love to have the moment when I walk the dog around the neighborhood and have just, some chance to get some natural light. Sometimes it's with my husband, sometimes it's with a friend, but just that sort of like a little bit quiet, a little bit nature moment with my dog is pretty chill, and it always starts my day on a high note if I'm able to do that.
Awesome. What's your dog's name?
Dante.
Oh, yes. I just want to give him a little
exactly. He's the Italian stallion. Yes.
Excellent. Well, I know that you were the head of HR, but you got your start as an attorney.
Yes.
And, I know for a lot of people, maybe that's obvious. For me, it was not obvious. Could you tell us about your journey a little bit? Like, how did that happen?
Sure. I had a totally non-linear career path, and I am a big fan of that. I started off out of college with liberal arts degrees, and I kind of thought I would go to law school, but I needed to pay off student loans. So I started off in high-tech PR and did that for a couple of years, and then went to law school and thought I was going to be sort of doing more sort of public law, like maybe going into politics at some point or being a DA. And I did a summer at the DA's office, and it was really not for me. And then I got into corporate law, and there were things about it that intellectually I really enjoyed, but my favorite part was always talking to people about the agreements that I had drafted or helping employees understand what the terms of their equity awards were. And it turns out that that piece of lawyering really just lends itself to the HR space. And so when I went in-house first as an attorney to Intuit, the head of HR at the time there was like, wow, you really seem to have a knack for people. Would you like to be an HR person? And I was a little like, but I'm an attorney, as though it's like somehow this immutable fact. And she was like, you could do both. And, it was a bit of a aha moment. You don't have to think of all these things as being so binary. And so literally ever since then, I've been in HR roles and maintaining my, standing as an attorney. And it all seems to mesh very well together. The kind of law that I practiced was sort of executive compensation and employee benefits. So it's sort of an intersection of things that are a big part of HR. And like sort of overall the way it's worked out, I really enjoy sort of the combination. I don't think I'd ever go back to just being an attorney, because I really like some of the more, I don't know, nuanced personal kind of connections I get to make as an HR person.
Beautiful. Was there anything or I guess, what has surprised you most in this journey from being in a more narrow lane of attorneying or lawyering to the more broad lane of HR?
Well, one of the things that, consistently surprises me, but is just a fact, is that so many of the skills that are part of being a good lawyer help me succeed in the HR realm. And
Mm,
it's the same reasons why lots of people say, "Oh, go to grad school. Those, even if you don't end up doing that thing, it'll be really useful." You know,
mm,
reading carefully and making sure, like a big part of contract law, which is not something really I do now, is, but I remember one of my law professors really talking about the importance of ensuring that you're documenting the actual agreement,
mm,
not just what the paper says, but what's the point.
mm,
And that is inherent in almost every conversation with employees.
mm,
What are what are they trying to get across, or what is a manager trying to land, and what is an employee trying to understand. What's the benefit of what's going on, what's the downside, and being
mm,
clear about those things. So all of sort of those basic skills around, reading, writing, driving towards clarity are a big part, I think, of what makes a successful experience for people with HR.
hmm. Interesting. Because what you're talking about is, we often think, well, HR is where the heart is inside of an
Yes.
organization. And we often don't think historically, the attorneying is where the heart is. But, but what you're talking about is driving clarity, and clarity is kindness.
Totally. I completely believe that. And I think it's doing attorneys a disservice if they're not asked to have a heart.
Mm,
Because I think everyone needs to think about what they're doing in many contexts, but certainly doing HR a disservice if it's like we don't have a head. And
yeah,
I think all those things have to go together. Um, I think of it, head, heart, and hands, because you need to not only think about things deeply, care about people, and then do the work to be successful.
yeah, beautiful. Well, I know that you are a believer that we can do a better job individually, collectively, in keeping our personal and professional lives in harmony. Um, and some environments, honestly, some days are more conducive to that than others. But where do we start with this?
Well, I think number one, like I love the subheading of our Zoom today, finding this personal and professional harmony. I think the idea of balance or perfect harmony is, of course, like a little bit of a pipe dream. So some of it is compassion or self awareness that, harmony is sort of achieved in a rare moment, but more it's striving for that all the time. Um, so that we, are caring about ourselves when things aren't totally perfect. But in the long run, I really think about things, and I know you do too, in a way of like, how do I bring my best self to all the things that I'm doing personally and professionally? And I've learned over time that I can't be the best person in the office or at home or anywhere in between if I haven't done the basic things to make myself feel good, taking care of oneself. And some of this feels basic, but if you're not getting enough sleep, if you're not doing exercise, if you're not drinking water and eating right, you're just not going to be performing at your best. And I understand there are crises that happen and those things fall away for 24 hours every now and again. But you can't sustainably, ignore those like physical imperatives and still be successful in any way, because we're all human beings, and we can't help it if those things aren't right. We can ignore it as much as we want, it's still going to come out, and we're going to be shorter with people. We're going to be less creative, we're going to be less forgiving, all those things that if we bring our best selves to work, you know that it's a holistic thing.
Beautiful. So, at an individual level, what gets in the way of this? I feel like we have all this good information about the things we're supposed to be doing, and still we don't take action. What has been helpful for you in actually moving from information into action?
Yeah. I think for me, it's just sort of an awareness over time that if I don't prioritize those things, I see where I'm failing. And for me, it hasn't been like some catastrophic failure where I had to like, you know, stop the presses and do everything differently. But in little things, when I might have told you this story before, Scott, but when I was at LinkedIn, I had a pretty big team in Singapore, and a lot of times it seemed like we would be having late night calls with Singapore, of course, because of the time change. And I never wanted to always be the one saying, do it on my time schedule. So for a few weeks and over a few course of months, I would always be having Singapore calls at 10 p.m. And then I realized I was starting to really not like my Singaporean team. And I was starting to say no to all the requests that were coming in. And it was like, well, why was it? I had helped hire those people. I knew they were really good at their jobs. What was going on? Well, the problem was every time I was talking to them, I was thinking, when can I go to bed? Well, I'm tired. I've used up my goodwill for the day.
Yeah.
And I had to sort of think about, okay, how can I reschedule these things so that there's a little more of a balance? And lo and behold, then I'm able to have lovely conversations with the outstanding team that I've gotten a different place, who has started to think that I'm like the worst. So the worst of all time. So, like that's one example. But I mean, I think whatever it is in your own life, if you can kind of examine, okay, what's not going right, and what are the factors that might contribute to that.
Yeah.
And I sort of have learned over time that I have to prioritize um, some of those basic things so that I bring my best self. And the expression, you can't pour from an empty cup, I think is very evocative of that feeling. I want to try and always bring um, empathy and energy and creativity to problems that I'm facing. And those are just not things that are at their highest, when I'm hangry or exhausted.
Exactly. Good.
Yeah.
At the organizational level, from as an HR leader, as an organization from HR, what role does HR have in helping create this balance or this harmony or this sense of wellness among employees?
I think that HR people play a really important role. And the thing is, I don't think that the HR person in the room always has to be the one who is the font of all the goodness around this. I think a good HR team sets up structures that help leaders and employees understand how to find that in themselves. And whether that's, creating situations where you're reminded of wellness, or you're just reminded of the importance of how to have some one-on-one interactions with employees and focus in on people as individuals. Like all of those things, HR can really just be there as that little like voice of reason or reminder for people, because we are all inherently so busy, and the pace of work that we're all in, and especially for those of us who I think are in the tech realm, there are constantly a few different screens going, and many different ways that people are pinging us, whether it's phone, Slack, email, text, and there's just a cacophony of noise. And so if HR can just help managers, employees realize, okay, you have to take the second and understand that it's better to have a 20-minute one-on-one with an employee who's having a tough day or whom you need to give feedback, and really utilize that time, then block a 45-minute one-on-one and be multitasking a few different ways. And
Mm.
so I feel like good HR sets up structures that remind people of all this, and then also hopefully create sort of organizational capacities that are efficient and don't waste a lot of people's time either, because
Mm.
there are sort of operational things around HR that can take a lot of time or a little. And if you can set up great information for people where they get their questions answered about how they seek I don't know, mental health support quickly if they need it, then it doesn't become a crisis that a bunch of people have to react to. If employees start to realize, oh, I can go to a wiki page or this chat bot and be connected with where those services are, that's like, then HR is doing their job. If that's like a black box and you've got to go through 5 people to get there, no bueno.
Right. It adds to the noise. It goes going back
Yeah.
to that clarity is kindness. Yeah, that's
Yes.
good.
Yeah.
One of the things I'm personally interested in is talking about conscious business, refining what it means. What does it mean to be a conscious leader? I'd be interested to get your perspective on that, having worked for a variety of different types of leaders. What do you think a conscious business is, or a conscious leader?
I probably am a bigger believer in a conscious leader. I think as individuals, we all really can have a responsibility to do a good job with the functions of our role, achieving the competencies that are needed, making impacts. But we also have responsibilities as humans to have EQ and be aware of others and interact with people in a way that's warm and compassionate and empathetic. And I know that when people do that, they create connections that always give back, and it's a flywheel. So I
Mm.
think the more that we help leaders understand that too, they not only need to make the right strategic decisions for a business to succeed, but they need
Mhm.
to think about how they model behavior they want to see in organizations. I think that's
Mm.
all super important. I think asking that of an entity is I mean, for me lately, in the way like the economy has been and the ups and downs of the
Mhm.
world as a macro environment, it's a little tougher. I'd rather think about networks of conscious leaders
Mhm.
and how all that sort of builds upon itself.
Mhm. Beautiful.
I don't know. I mean, tell me what you think about it, because I
No,
always feel like I learned from you.
I think it always starts with the individual, in my opinion, and that organizations, companies, groups, teams are just collections of those individuals, right? So they go hand in hand. But for me, if a business can balance the needs of all of its stakeholders, then it's, moving towards being a conscious business. Meaning if
Yeah.
a group can solve for customers, solve for shareholders, because yeah, you have to stay in business, and solve for employees, and create a nice balance between the three. So we're solving for the big we instead of just the little me, then we're
Uh-huh.
onto something.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds like perfect organizational harmony. And
Yeah,
maybe that's a little bit like the personal and professional harmony. It's like if you can achieve that perfect equilibrium every now and again, that's awesome. Like that's the
right,
the total peak of success. But knowing you're just striving for it is great.
right. So thinking about, I know a lot of your career has been in tech, and tech industry over the last couple of years has done tons of layoffs, big
Yes.
ballooning in hiring and then layoffs. And one of the questions I've been wrestling with is there a conscious way or a humane way to do layoffs, a better way than, well, a better way? And I'm curious, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's something I've thought a lot about. Um, uh, Instacart did have to do some layoffs earlier this year. And it was something that we thought long and hard about. How do we do this in a way that's best? And it's because we really wanted to be caring for all of our employees. And we thought about, we think about employees from, the very first day, certainly to the very last and beyond. And we wanted people to be, leaving sort of as fans of the company and didn't want that last experience to be a bad one. And it's really a challenge where where our teams decided to bias was kind of back to that clarity is caring. We tried to get people who were impacted information about the situation as quickly and as clearly as we could so
Hmm.
that no one was in limbo, um,
Mm,
any longer than they had to be about what this meant for them, whether that was, details of the severance package and how Cobra works and, all the dates and how that would impact them. We really bias towards providing that as quickly and as clearly as possible. And I think that, you know, it is tough because to some degree, the way to be as quick and clear with that is to be acting in a way that's not necessarily one to one as an individual, which is tough because when you have a very tough personal situation, we want to talk to someone one to one. That's like
mhm,
you inherently want to get there.
mhm.
And we were trying to do this in a way when we know we had a large number of people who are being impacted. So
Yeah.
we had to do some one to many communications quickly and then offer up the opportunity for people to follow up and have any one to one discussions that they needed. And
Mm,
that was sort of the the speed to information was where we hoped would like start to help people put their anxiety at rest. It doesn't make these situations easier.
mhm.
um but what I didn't want was for people to feel in limbo and
Yeah,
wondering any
yeah.
longer than they had to be.
That seems like a good place to start. And how did it go? And is there anything that you learned from the process? If you had to do it again, is there anything you'd do differently?
um it's just I think that um if I had to do it differently, um, I mean, you never want to have to do layoffs. So, like, if I
Right.
had to, I'd rather not do it again. These things are business imperatives that are just very hard.
Mhm.
And it's, I wish that there was a way to help people impacted in these kinds of situations. You know, when you open the paper these days, there's still pretty much a lot of that happening. And to help people like really try and move away from taking that personally, you
Mm,
know, not to take sort of like the changes in a business setting where these are sort of again, you know, business decisions being made at a corporate level as
mm,
something that people take too personally. And
sure.
I'd love to figure out if there's a way to help to land those messages a little more for folks,
Yeah.
because I think it's just hard for people. We all take our jobs so seriously. We want to succeed. Success professionally is something that people really lionize in our society,
Mhm,
and it's, you know, it's not always something that's going, like layoffs show us that it's not a perfect meritocracy. These things
mm,
happen, and you know, good people are impacted. And if there was a way to sort of help, you know, everyone sort of understand that a little more deeply, I'd love to get
mhm.
there.
Beautiful. How do we, because part of our role is driving culture and creating this culture where people feel connected, and sometimes we even use the word family, and I know you might
Yeah,
have a reaction to that word, but, you know, the sense of it, and that sense of we're all in the
yeah,
same
yeah,
tribe or the same group,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then at the same time, there's the real needs of the business, sometimes including letting people go. And so how do we find that balance? I mean, we are talking about harmony. How do we find that harmony?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, family is I think tough. I mean, you know, like for me, I have really deep friendships with many people who I met professionally, and then you become friends beyond the professional setting.
Mhm,
And sometimes those friends become like family, and I've definitely been in situations where, you know, professional colleagues that have become friends care for you in a way that is like family. I try to avoid using family again in the writ corporate setting,
mm,
because I think it's just, I think that starts to make a promise that I don't think, you know, a capitalist
mhm,
society can really make good on.
mhm,
And so, you know, that's where I am a huge fan of creating deep relationships amongst individuals in the professional setting.
mhm,
And I
mm,
think that's where, you know, I would index. But again, in finding personal and professional harmony, I also think about the importance of cultivating personal friendships outside of work,
mhm,
and familial relationships, and all of those things have an important place in our lives.
mhm,
And I would say, if you find yourself in a situation where, you know, every day or every week you're only talking to people from work, like I would suggest it's worth creating more relationships outside of that environment too,
mm,
because that's going to enrich your life, and that enriches your life professionally as well.
mhm. Cool. We've covered some good territory from, you know, kind of career management and finding balance. I know you have, family members, a daughter who's kind of new in the work
Yes,
environment. I'm curious what advice you give her in terms of managing career, knowing,
yes,
you know, knowing what you know about your own career.
yes. Well, yes. So you and I have like similar aged kids, and I have my oldest is a 23-year-old who has her first job. And it really brings to light for me, you know, how much, how different the work world is for someone who's brand new in it. And
Mm,
so we have talked about things where she will call me after a tough day at work and really be concerned that a mistake she's made is going to be, you know, a career suicide. 3 months into her career. And we'll talk through it, and we talk about the importance of like having a little bit of the goldfish mindset. Okay, you make a mistake and you learn from it and you move forward and you move on. At LinkedIn we'd say next play, but
Mhm.
that resiliency is important for people new and in the working world overall. For those of us who've been working for a while, part of the reason I think we can keep doing it is like, hey, there are little foot faults that happen. You continue to learn, grow, do better next time.
Yeah.
The other thing is, with the sort of remote environment or flex first, I think the newer you are in a job, the more important it is that you take advantage of building relationships and learning from your colleagues. And so I would suggest that, especially if you are remote, it's worth making extra efforts to build up a rapport and a communication string so that you have someone you can bounce ideas off of in whatever environment you're in, so you learn more about how things are done there. And those have been some of the advice that I've given her recently.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thanks.
I know you are at Instacart. Any shout outs for the work that you and your team are doing there?
Oh, I think our team is just doing some great work, and I love, what Instacart does. What pulled me to them originally was, to create access to food and more time for people to enjoy it. And I
Mm.
know that a lot of people watching this are, very busy working professionals, and so I hope that Instacart eases sometimes your need for groceries or any other things that can be delivered quickly.
Beautiful. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you. And but before we leave, what's one thing that gives you hope?
I think one thing that gives me hope is that there are so many good people out there in the working world that I come upon every day who, in whatever job they might have, really show love and caring for their colleagues, whether they know them well or not, whether they have HR in their title or not. And, 9 times out of 10 or more, I am consistently surprised by people wanting to do the right thing and help others. And I really believe that that's inherent in how most people approach their day.
Beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. All right.
Thanks, Scott.
Christina
It's been
Hall,
fun.
thank you so much for being with us.
It's been lovely to talk to you. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Take care.
Bye.